Hello, Year 8. So today we will be moving on to Lesson 12, which is Solutions for LICs. This will be a case study on Bangladesh. So if you want to pause the video, you can write down the title and today's date. That would be great. Brilliant. So, as you can see on the world map, we are looking at Bangladesh today. Bangladesh is next to India. It is in a pretty hot region of the world. I would recommend you could pause this video again and go onto Google Earth or Google Maps and have a look at it yourself. Probably have a look a little bit at the satellite imagery. It's really interesting to see. As a comparison, Bangladesh, just for you to remember, you might actually want to write this down as well. Bangladesh has 163 million people, and the size of the land is 60%, so 60% the size of the UK. But the UK, for a comparison again, has 66 million people. Bangladesh has 163 million. Bangladesh is smaller, about 60%, and the UK is a little bit bigger. So keep that in mind when we're looking here. So, on to the next one. So today you will be learning what an LIC is, and you'll be writing down the definitions in your book because they will be useful. You will identify the positives and the negatives for methods combating climate change are for people within LICs, and you will make an informed judgment on what is the best method for reducing the impact of climate change within Bangladesh. So, let's have a look. This list, I would recommend you write these down. I'll explain them to you first, and then I suggest you write them down, and if you want, write them down in your own wording. So when I explain them now, it might be pretty handy for you to pause and go back and go forward in the video for you to be able to write these down. LIC is low income country, and you can see third one down, income, is money being received. So low income country is a country that doesn't receive much money. They used to be called third world countries, but for different reasons, like the terminology's been changed, and it now means a country that earns roughly $1,000 or less per person per year. I've got per person, but it's per person per year on average. Pennies, not much money at all. HIC, high income country, so it's the opposite of that. A country that earns $12,500 or more per person per year on average. All of the income for everybody being added up together and divided per person. So that doesn't mean everybody will have 12,500, but all of the money added up together in 1 year, divide by the amount of people you have, that's what you end up having. And this is a rating that everybody does globally. Income, we've been through that, and infrastructure. This is pretty important. This will be a word you will be using at some point. This is a geography-based word. Infrastructure are the structures and facilities that people use. Buildings, roads, power supplies, water connections, drainage. So if it's state-owned, if the country owns it, it can be hospitals, it can be schools as well, to an extent. So, infrastructure is kind of the daily stuff we use every single day. Pause the video and write those down. They are really useful. You will be using them. So resume the video when you're ready. Good, right, so here we go. Underneath this video, there should be 4 resources. I'm not sure yet if they're going to be in one file or if they're going to be in 4 separate ones, but you will be able to see these. For an example, I have number 4 right next to me right now. It is receive funding from the UN. The UN is the United Nations. So, pause the video, go and find those and make sure you can access them. If you can print them off, I'd recommend printing them off. If you can't print them off, that's fine because you can still access them online, and we will be reading them in a minute. So, if you do have access to a printer, print them off. If you don't, go and have a quick read through them, and then come back and play the video. Right, so going back through receiving aid from the UN and other HIC countries. In all of these, there's going to be some pros and cons. These are the sort of things you need to be able to identify. They're not going to be clearly labelled, so it's going to be down to your decision making. This is going to be really important for the activity we will be doing. Prime example here is Bangladesh received roughly $2 billion per year in aid and funding. That's roughly £1,400 million. Huge amount of money. But it's unclear at the moment if all of that money goes to where it's needed the most. And that could be down to corruption in some form. So there's a positive and a negative. Huge amounts of money, and a negative maybe that it doesn't reach where it's meant to be. So I have put that down in the table. Let's have a look. Under the table, you should find that by the PDF, you will find a table. The table I have on the next page is pretty easy. If you can't print it out, don't worry, you can do it in your book. If you're going to do it in your book, I'd recommend you take a whole new page, turn it landscape so it's wider than it is tall, and start working on it that way. Use a ruler, and you'll have to figure it out on roughly the sizings based on your handwriting. So number 2, using the resources, fill out each of the 4 methods of coping with global warming, okay? Number 3, you give this a rating out of 10. There's no right answer. This is down to you and what you think it's worth. Like, how valuable do you think this option is? I've got one on the next page for you to see. Here we go. So, method. This is an example. You don't have to use the same positives. You don't have to use the same negatives. There's lots of each. And the rating is down to you. So, for this method, I've written down the one I have next to me, which is receiving aid from the UN. What is it? It's a group of HIC. HIC is high-income countries that will contribute money to help other low-income countries who need help. The positives. Low-income countries are poor and will need lots of money for big projects. If you're going to be doing things like preventing flooding, if you're going to be putting in better drainage, if you're going to be building schools, or in one of the other resources you're going to see about storm shelters or typhoon towers and different structures that do need help, they cost a lot of money. So that's where this can come in handy. It is really useful. One of the negatives is corruption can stop the money making it to the people who need it the most. It's a big issue. It's a massive issue as well, especially if other countries are giving money and it never goes to people who need the help. I've given it a 5 out of 10. There's a couple of reasons. I'm not entirely sure where all of the money goes, and I'm not entirely sure how clear it is on where the money goes. You may give it a 10 out of 10. You may give it a 2. It's up to you. As long as you can justify it, that's completely fine. So, on to the next one. Oh no, wait, you need to pause the video and write down each of these. So you have 3 boxes left to fill out and 3 rows. 3 rows, 3 sections, and 3 different information PDFs. Write down what it is. When we say write down, give an explanation of what it is. It doesn't have to be perfectly worded. It needs to be worded in the way that you could explain it to a friend and they would roughly understand what it would be. Positives, it's what you think the best positive is, and the negative is whatever negative you think is probably the most important, and out of 10 is how important out of 10, how good it is out of 10. So pause this video, go finish off that, and then come back, press play when you're ready. Brilliant. So now you're back. What we're going to be doing is, this will be the case study. We're going to look at 2 different people within Bangladesh living in 2 different conditions and having 2 different problems. And you're going to be looking back at your table and you're going to be allocating one of the strategies to them. So in the next task, you will be writing one of the 4 methods as a recommendation to these people. Use this as a rough template to begin with. So I believe that the best method for the person's name, there's 2 different people, would be to insert method. So I could say, as the example I've been going with this entire lesson, is receiving aid from the UN. So I could say, I believe that the best method for the farmer would be to receive aid. this is because expensive farming machinery that may be able to help him build better roads could be the best option, as this would prevent people from drowning, and some tractors can go quite deep in water and still function, so the farm can still run. So, let's have a look. Here we go. What you need to do is you need to explain, using this template, what it is you would be doing, or what you would recommend to this gentleman for his problem. His problem is, or he says, it's become really hard to work. Most of the pathways towards the field are completely flooded. My family is starving. I live on a delta. Right, a delta is the area of where a river will meet the sea. Sometimes the river, as it goes up to sea, can make a landmass where it looks like the little veins you can see in a leaf, like lots of little tributaries and rivers making little banks of land. So he's in between loads of little rivers, and that's what a delta is, right next to the sea. I live on a delta, and the water is getting closer to my house. I want to leave, but I don't have the money to travel. A Bangladesh farmer. So, now, can you explain which method you would use from the resources to help this man? You're going to have to pause this video. So this is on your screen. You're going to have to look back in your book, look at all 4 of those methods, and you're going to have to write down what you would recommend to this gentleman. So, pause the video and begin writing. Perfect. So, now that you've finished off writing a recommendation, bear in mind it doesn't have to be perfect and it can be different to someone else's. It's based on you justifying why you think it's a good idea. On to the next one. Right, so, this lady says, this is the 3rd time in the last 10 years that many houses in my village have collapsed due to storms. 23 people have died inside their homes, says the Bangladesh housewife. You can see in the background the houses using like bamboo sticks or bamboo poles. The ceiling is sagging. It's made from sheet metal. It's not particularly strong and may not be able to stand up to high winds. So, what you need to do, you need to be able to pause this video, look back at your table, and write down a recommendation on how you would suggest to help this lady. If you want, you can use a combination of 2 different methods, but you need to explain why. So, pause the video and go and have a look. Brilliant. So, here we go. So you should have written that down. It should be a couple of lines, best part of a paragraph. So, on to the next page. Right, if you have finished all of that in time, what I would like you to do is find out if global warming and climate change is bad news for every country. As we've just seen, Bangladesh is going to be having a bad time. Bangladesh is, nearly all of it is at sea level, so with the rising sea levels with global warming, they're going to be in for a bad time. They're going to have a lot of problems. But not every country is like Bangladesh. And what I want you to do, if you do have the time now, go onto the internet and do some research. Find out if any countries will benefit in any way from warmer temperatures. Whatever you do find, I want you to be able to explain it in your own words. So write it down. You could write down the title, who would benefit from climate change? So someone somewhere may benefit from it. It may be fishermen in the northern hemisphere that needs access to water more often around the year. So it could be something as trivial as that, but you need to be able to find an example and try and use locations, try and use cities, countries, and geographical wording. Explain as much as you can in as much detail. I've linked a video underneath that might be able to help. This will be talking a little bit more about the rising sea levels and the impacts of climate change over our lifetimes. So, now that you've finished, have a look at this. And if you haven't quite finished yet, make sure you finish your table, make sure you finish your recommendations in as much detail as you can. So brilliant. Now we finished. I will see you for next lesson. Brilliant. Thank you, Year 8.